Greetings, barbecue family. Welcome to another live episode of the Backyard SmokeMaster BBQ Podcast. Today is the 75th episode of this podcast, and I'm so pleased that the stars have aligned. We have a very special guest this evening, and he is bearing with me. I am already having a day. Here in California, we're having a heat wave. Issues with the power grid. My power went off about an hour and a half ago, and I went into panic mode, and then it magically came back on in time for us to invite our special guest. So without further delay, I am so pleased to bring to the podcast one of 40 living barbecue Hall of Famers, Mr. Meathead. Meathead, thank you so much for coming on. I do
What a
appreciate
pleasure.
it. Yes,
I look pretty
absolutely.
fuzzy there, but that could have been the wine I had with dinner.
Well, I think you look absolutely great. You look pretty
Oh, yeah?
clear.
Well, the picture I'm seeing, I'm kind of badly out of focus. But that's okay.
Oh,
You know, Harry Truman once said, as a beauty, I'm really no star. There are others better looking by far. But my face, I don't mind it because I'm behind it. It's the people out front that I jar.
nice. Nice.
So I don't care if I'm out of focus.
Well, you guys, let me know in the comments, guys, if to help reassure both Meathead and myself. On my screen, he looks fine and he sounds
Okay.
fine. But let me know in the comments if you think that he's coming in out of focus, and to give you guys a chance to weigh in on that. Let me just read some of these accolades to make sure that
Oh,
I'm
Christ.
giving him proper credit. And again, I already mentioned that he's one of 40 living barbecue Hall of Famers. He is the publisher of AmazingRibs.com, which is the largest and most popular barbecue and grilling website in the world, of which I am also one of the charter members. So I've been, a part of that community for a very long
Nice.
time. Oh, absolutely.
Cool.
It is my go-to, whenever I'm thinking about buying a new grill or an accessory or needing, advice on a recipe or anything like that. That's where I go to get
That's
that
cool. I'm glad to
information.
hear that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's a New York Times bestseller, the publisher of Meathead, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, was named one of the 100 best cookbooks of all time by Southern Living magazine. So we're not just talking about one of the best barbecue books of all time, one of the best cookbooks of all time. And just this a couple of weeks ago, his new book, The Meathead Method, was released. And Alton Brown of the Food Network says that it's the only book on outdoor cookery that you'll ever need. So again, very thrilled and happy that you are joining us today.
Oh, my
So,
pleasure. Thank you for the kind words. Um, it's, the first book did far better than anybody thought it would. It's about 250,000 copies. Most cookbooks, if you do 10 to 20,000, you're doing great. So that was tremendous. I think it was second only to the Barbecue Bible by Stephen Reichlin.
yeah,
And that book's been out 10 years longer. But it took
right.
me 10 years to do the new book, The Meathead Method, and I'm pretty proud of it. There's some really good stuff in there. Yeah, I'm hoping you got a copy. Did you not?
I do. I did get a copy of it,
Great,
and I'm
great.
just starting to dive into it. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about you and your approach, is that you take the time to help us understand, the science behind it. You're not just kind of like throwing these recipes or ideas at us, but trying to help us understand, why doing it a certain way makes sense, and why that could work. And I do appreciate kind of that marriage between, the science of barbecue and the art of barbecue.
Well, there is a movement in the culinary arts today towards nerdism, I call it. In the other arts, in painting, for example, you have impressionism, fauvism, modernism, postmodern. Well, culinary arts have had their movements too. There was a period where French cooking was all the rage, and right now I think the movement is leaning towards nerdism. It's 2025. We all carry a computer in our back pocket that's more powerful than the one that went to the moon. We're an advanced society. People who cook now want to know, why do I do step one? What happens if I skip step two? My parents, it was like, do step one and shut up. Do step two and shut up. People now want to know, what happens if I swap brown sugar for white sugar? So, and I've always had an interest in the sciences. People sometimes call me a meat scientist. I'm not. But I have studied meat science. I know a lot about it. And both the books, both my first book, which was titled Meathead, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, and this book, The Meathead Method, are laid out pretty much the same. The first half of the book is science. It's a science book. It's not too advanced, obviously. 250,000 people have it. It's got a solid 5-star rating on Amazon, so it can't be too complex. I try to explain in lay terms what happens when energy in the form of heat meets protein and fat and carbohydrates and all the other compounds that are in food, and what changes. Because, every time you start cooking, you start a chemistry and physics experiment.
Yes.
You start using physics to change the chemistry. And people seem to want to know about that. And if you understand these core concepts, then you can cook just about anything. And if something goes wrong, you can get out of it alive. So, there's a good deal of science.
Absolutely. And I've liked, you said, I've read this in your book, basically you made the point that, anything that you cook indoors can be cooked outdoors and made even a little bit better.
So I think so.
Love that. Before we get too far into it, I do want to invite, the folks who are watching live, to also chime in with your comments. This is your opportunity to get a question into a living and breathing barbecue Hall of Famer. Let me just kind of pull up a few here if I can. Just to reassure us all, Jeff says that you look fine. Meathead looks very good, looks well. And Mike Sue says he has the first book, really enjoyed it, so he can't wait to get the latest book.
Thank you, Mike.
All right. So let me dive into a few questions, and we'll kind of see where the conversation and everything goes. But what inspired you to write the Meathead Method, and how does it differ from the previous book, Meathead: The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling?
Well, it was economics. I finished the first book, and there was a lot of stuff that I couldn't fit into it. And I proposed to the publisher, let's do a 2-book set. And they said, no, the public won't spend $70 on a 2-book set. So forget about it. So a lot of stuff that hit the cutting room floor from the first book came into the second book. Now, the first book was very, it laid the foundation for the discussion of how barbecue works and how what is smoke, what is flame, and a lot of basic concepts. And the recipes are backyard recipes, ribs and chicken and steak and the classic barbecue and grilling canon. I threw in a couple of interesting experimental type things. This book, well, I couldn't do this. You had to have a ribs recipe, but I couldn't do another backyard ribs recipe because the best one I know is in the first book. So what I did was I went to the competition cooks. And I don't go to a lot of competitions, but I go to a few, and they cook differently. Yes. I mean, they're cooking a slab of ribs with the idea that the judges are going to get one bone.
One bite, right.
And they're probably going to get one bite.
Yeah.
And you've got to knock them out of the seat with that one bite. So how do they do that? What kind of things do they do to that rib bone or that slab to really get the attention? And I mean, I was talking to some guy who said, I use a different rub on the top of the bone and the bottom of the bone because the top of the bone hits the roof of the mouth and it's got a different set of taste buds than the tongue. And he's right. So he is catering to both sets of taste buds. Very clever. They do a lot. So I got in this book a recipe that resembles very closely what the competition cooks do. And I did that for all the classic competition meats, ribs, chicken, pork, and brisket. So, if you want to try to produce fantastic competition grade meat in your backyard, I'll show you how. Or, got to help you if you don't want to enter a competition. I'm giving you a running start. In addition, the recipes, there's a lot of new methods, a lot of new techniques in here. Here's a good one. Tonight I did a batter fried halibut. And I did it on my gas grill. Now, I mean, I know everybody out there loves fried chicken. But you don't cook it at home because it makes a bloody mess. You put it on a stovetop and it spatters all over the stovetop and all over the countertop and gets on the floor, sets off the smoke alarm, stinks for 3 days, and then you end up sleeping on the couch. Do it on your gas grill. Get a Dutch oven with high sides. Put about 2 inches of oil in there. Put it on your gas grill and turn the burner underneath that Dutch oven to high. Turn all the other burners off. Now you've got, bring the temperature up to 350 or so, 375, and take your chicken and dredge it in flour or a batter or whatever you want. In the oil it goes, fries up to safe temperature in just minutes. And it's fantastic. It's as good as any fried chicken you'll buy at KFC. Better. Take it out of the oil and put it on the other side, and it'll drip dry. And then you can load up the Dutch oven again. Yes. So there's other methods. For example, I show you how to, I know everybody out there loves Chinese food. Right. And I cook Chinese food at home. And it's always good, but it's never quite as good as the Chinese restaurant. And that's because if you've ever been in the Chinese restaurant or seen one on YouTube, they cook with a wok on top of a bloody darn volcano. It's really hot. Well, I was out in the yard one day and I was starting up my Weber kettle with a charcoal chimney. And I looked at that charcoal chimney. It was around dusk. And there was a blue flame coming out of the top of that thing. So I ran and got my wok, put it down on there, and got my infrared gun and measured the temperature. It was like 800.
Wow.
So I went inside, chopped up that steak. My wife chopped up some veggies, whipped up a quickie sauce, and we made the best Asian food that we'd ever had because we were cooking on a volcano. Fantastic. Nice. So, there's all kinds of interesting methods. Smoked fettuccine. And I teach these techniques, these methods in this book that didn't appear in the first book. And then the recipes are based on these methods. They demonstrate the methods. And I also bring in a lot of new ingredients. I want to challenge the barbecue cook to get out of the mold. And so there's Asian ingredients, there's Spanish ingredients, Italian ingredients, and the recipes are marvelous.
Absolutely. Okay. Let me get to a few questions from the folks who are watching. Uh, Bruce, aka Correctional Officer for Lockdown, wants to know, when did you first start grilling?
Well, about age 10.
Wow.
My dad owned a butcher. He was a food technology major at NYU. He came out of World War II, registered at NYU in food technology, graduated after 4 years, opened a butcher shop, and he would grill. Flank steak was his specialty. And I loved going out back and hanging out with him while he was grilling. I loved the smell. He might have let me have a sip of beer every now and then. That might have got me motivated.
Right.
But I would hang out with him and ask him questions. I wasn't doing the cooking, but he was. By the time I got to college, I was living in an apartment complex, kind of a U-shaped apartment complex. We were on the ground floor, and they had these cast aluminum grills stuck in the ground around the grounds there. And one of them was right out our sliding door, right out our back door. I went to the University of Florida, so you can grill all year round. And I started cooking, and my roommates loved it, and they loved it enough to make me sort of the house chef.
Of course.
And I cooked all the time. I loved it, and I wanted to get better. And I went into some of the neighborhoods that the white college kids didn't normally go into, and I met Y.T. Parker, who had a barbecue joint with an open pit out back. And I started eating there and asking him questions, and he finally let me go out back and hang out with his buddy, and they gave me a sip of beer too. And I learned Southern open pit barbecue from those guys. That just furthered me down the path. So I've been hanging around grills for a long time.
All right. So if it's just you and your family and you're hungry, you're not out to impress anyone, just want to eat good, what are you cooking?
Well, it would either be ribs, which is why I started the website. My neighbor was a butcher, and he was bragging on his ribs, and I was bragging on my ribs. And he challenged me to a competition, a throwdown with our wives as the judges. And so this is in the 1990s. And the internet was very different. There was no Google. The number one search engine was Yahoo.
Mm-hmm.
And Yahoo actually had human beings that went out and found websites and ranked them by human beings. And the internet was there was just nothing there about barbecue. There was no real barbecue website. And I had a little tech gene in me, so I started a website, and I thought I'd call it Amazing Ribs because I was going to have a great rib recipe to beat my butcher neighbor. And I put it on the internet, and eventually it grew, and I added steak and brisket and hamburger, and there's 2,000 pages on AmazingRibs.com that are free to the public, from recipes, science, myth busting. We're good at that. Product reviews.
Right.
We got a guy full time testing grills,
Max.
and smokers. Max, Max.
Absolutely.
And that's all he does. He tests grills and smokers. We don't sell anything. We'll send you to a page that you can order it or something, but we don't sell them. We got an electrical engineer who tests thermometers, hundreds of them. If you're shopping for a thermometer, check that out. And so I suppose if I was going to have one last meal, which is always the question I like to ask, you're on death row, what's your last meal going to be? It'd probably be ribs. But I got to tell you, I do love my steak. And it used to be I would argue adamantly in favor of ribeyes, but my dad's love of flank steak caught me. And I love flank steak, but your typical USDA choice flank steak, or even USDA prime, can be a little tough. You can make it tender if you cook it properly and you slice it properly. And one day, just on a splurge, I bought some Wagyu flank steak, and that kicked the ribeye off the chart. Wagyu, which is expensive, which is,
Right.
but it is the perfect tenderness and fattiness. And it's if you haven't done it, go get yourself a Wagyu flank steak. And we'll talk maybe a little later about reverse sear and stuff like that, but cook it hot and fast.
Hot and fast. What grill did
Paul?
you? Oh,
Yeah, Weber kettle.
Okay.
Weber kettle, and I still have a Weber kettle, and it's just my wife and me. And I although I have a fantastic Hasty Bake 357, which is just an amazing charcoal grill. I absolutely adore it. But I end up cooking on my Weber kettle most of the time. I've also got a killer gas grill with infrared burners. Now, let's take on this debate, gas versus charcoal, and get to the core of this.
All right.
Charcoal, when you light it, puts out a lot of smoke, and that's combustion gases and impurities and compounds that are being burned during the ignition phase. But if you watch that charcoal, that smoke goes away, and eventually there is no smoke. Charcoal is not for flavor. A lot of people say charcoal gives steak a better flavor.
Right.
It's not the smoke or the combustion gases that give steak its flavor.
Right.
It's the temperature. There's a lot of infrared radiation coming off of charcoal, and it's much higher than 90% of your gas grills. 90% of your gas grills don't produce enough infrared to make a great steak. But if you go to Morton's Steakhouse or any of the big steakhouses, they're cooking with gas, guys. No charcoal in those kitchens, and the steaks are fantastic. And that's because they have burners that produce infrared like crazy, equal to or greater than charcoal. And I've got a gas grill with 2 infrared burners in it. And I'll cook you a steak, and you will not be able to tell that it's gas or charcoal. And that's because it's infrared radiation. It's concentrated infrared radiation, and you get a lot of that from charcoal. Most gas grills are underpowered and don't have the intensity. If you're shopping for a gas grill, try to get one that has an infrared burner. And you will be shocked. You can make a steak on a gas grill as good as a charcoal grill. And that's what they do at the big steak. They're all cooking with gas.
What about the smoke flavor? Like, I guess I always thought of charcoal as being for the heat, but then, the wood chunks or whatever you're cooking with is what provides a little bit of smoke flavor. Like, how do you replicate that?
That you just nailed it. If you look at charcoal when it's fully engaged, when it's ashed over, there's no smoke. Now I'm talking about briquettes, and I'll differentiate between and briquettes in a minute. There's no smoke. Charcoal is for heat. Wood is for flavor. You get a chunk of wood, you throw it on the charcoal, catches on fire, and creates flavorful smoke. That's what you want. Charcoal is for heat. Wood is for flavor. Now, lump charcoal is different. Lump charcoal is made from whole chunks of wood, And in that bag, you might find a piece of charcoal the size of a softball and a lot of pieces the size of your thumb or your thumbnail. And then there's a lot of dust in there too. I'm a control freak. Cooking is all about temperature control, all about control. Briquettes, a charcoal chimney full of briquettes. Weber makes a really good chimney. You fill a Weber chimney to the top and it holds exactly 80 briquettes.
Right.
That's an entity, a known quantity of energy. If I fill it to the top, I know how much heat I'm going to get. Fill it halfway, 40 briquettes, getting half as much energy. So it's all controllable. When you take lump and put it in the charcoal chimney, there's all these different sizes.
Right.
They come from all these different sources. I've seen lumber in there, and God knows they use all kinds of preservatives in lumber to kill pests and other things. I've seen, in fact, there's a picture in this book, metal in there, computer parts. I just don't trust it. Plus the fact that it has to be fully carbonized, and it's not always fully carbonized. Often there's still cellulose and lignin down in the center, and you can tell because it starts snapping and crackling and popping, and it makes smoke. I don't want smoke from my charcoal. I don't know what kind of wood it is. I don't want charcoal smoke. I want wood smoke. So I'm a briquette. I don't use lump. I don't like it. I can't control the smoke it puts out. They're all different sizes, so I can't control the amount of energy it generates. I don't like all the dust in the bag. I don't like pieces of construction lumber in the bag because I think perhaps it's got preservatives in it. I am a charcoal briquette guy, and I don't mind the fact that they use some binders to hold they're made from sawdust, and they compress them with sawdust, and they use some harmless binders to hold it together. It doesn't scare me or concern me a bit. That's control.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my next question about the briquettes. All right. Well, I've never heard anyone formulate the argument for, briquettes so strongly in comparison to lump. So I think that's definitely some good nuggets for us to chew on. We do have a question. Which do you prefer, cast aluminum or porcelain enamel steel?
I think this is related to grates. I think he's asking which do I prefer as a grill grate.
Yeah.
I absolutely hate cast iron. It rusts too easily. You've got to put too much effort into maintaining it. My preference is stainless steel, thin wire grates, and that's because I don't want grill marks. The hot metal makes your grill mark. It's very hot, and it makes your grill marks, and all the TV chefs show you how to set meat down and then rotate it 45 degrees. That grill marks are a chemical reaction called the Maillard reaction, and it happens when proteins and amino acids are subjected to high heat. And there's three kinds of heat on your grill. There's conduction, which is the heat you get from hot metal. There's convection, which is warm air flow. And then there's infrared, which is what you get when you're cooking right over charcoal or flame. And they're all different. The conduction is the most energific or high energy. The infrared is next, and convection is dead last. And if you understand them and where to get them, you can control heat and you can control the outcome. Well, browning of the surface of the meat is a Maillard reaction. And that's changing the chemistry in the surface of the meat. And it creates new flavors. And a lot of them are really good. And that, when you do a Christmas beef roast, that end cut is dark brown, crunchy. Your beef brisket, you've got your bark. Everybody loves the bark. Well, I want my steak to have a bark. I want my steak to be even brown all over. I want it tender and juicy in the center, and I want the surface even. I don't want grill marks, because in between the grill marks, there's meat that hasn't been Maillard flavored. So my answer is I want a thin wire, and I will. And here's another. A lot of your listeners out there going, "This guy's breaking all the rules. He's a effing idiot." Call me an effing idiot if you want, but a lot of the rules that we have learned came down to us like I learned from my dad, and he learned from his dad, and he learned from his dad. But it's 2025, for crying out loud.
Right.
And we have food science departments in every university. And we've learned that a lot of the old rules are myths and need to be broken.
Yes.
And here's one. Cooking a burger, for example. And you're all told, set the burger down and don't move it. There's really good research, really good evidence that you should flip it, and you should flip it often. You should flip it every minute or two. And it cooks faster, and the interior is more even color if you flip it. Every cookbook ever written says, don't smash your hamburger with a spatula. But the juices that come out of that hamburger, the fat and the juices and the seasonings, hit the fire or the hot metal on a gas grill, and they vaporize and come back up onto the burger and give it great flavor. So why not smush your burger? Well, I'll tell you why. Because all that fat and juice comes out and you end up with a hard hockey puck.
Yeah.
Well, most burgers are 80-20. That is to say 80% lean, 20% fat. If you ask the butcher to give you ground meat 70-30, or if you bring it home and mix in some of the fat you trimmed from your brisket, you can now smash that burger, get juices dripping down on the flame or the hot metal, get the flavor benefit of it vaporizing, and it'll still be moist, 70-30 or 75-25, but more fat than you would with a normal burger.
Right.
All these rules, most of what we've been given is no longer valid. We can talk about reverse sear. This is a crucial concept.
About that. Yes.
Crucial concept. Almost every time you cook, I want you to divide your grill in half. I want a hot side where all the coals are banked up, or where the burner on your grill is on high. And the other side, there's nothing. No charcoal, no burners. The hot side is cooking with infrared radiation. The other side is cooking with convection airflow. I want you to start most of your food on the side that has no coals, no flame. Let's take a look at a chicken. How many times have you gone to a barbecue, a party, a cookout, and the chicken is burnt on the outside and bloody on the inside? And that's risky because chicken is... Consumer Reports did a research project a few years ago where they discovered that 90% of chicken had pathogenic bacteria. Well, it's nothing to worry about. If you cook it to a safe temperature, you kill all the bacteria. 160 to 165 is your safe range. So take a chicken and start it on the indirect convection airflow side with no flame underneath. It'll gently warm so that it reaches the same temperature from edge to edge. If you start it directly over the coals, you're going to burn the skin, you're going to burn the surface, and you're going to get a layer of overcooked chicken beneath the surface, and you got to dig down to get a perfectly tender, juicy interior. Take a steak, for example. Put it over direct hot flame. You get a layer of brown, a layer of tan, a layer of pink, and then maybe half the thickness is perfect medium rare. And we know, I say perfect medium rare, we know, again, because of food science, there's a gadget called the Warner-Bratzler machine. And it's an artificial tooth, a piece of metal, that presses down on the meat and measures how much pressure it takes to cut through the meat. And we know that it is most tender and most juicy in that 130 to 135 range, and that's medium rare. But if you put it directly over the heat, you're going to get this rainbow effect of browns and pinks before you get to medium rare. If you start the steak over on the indirect side, where it's warming by convection airflow, it's going to warm gently. It's going to take longer than normal, but it's going to warm gently, and it's going to be the same temperature from edge to edge. When it hits about 120 or 125, remember our target's 130 to 135. When it gets to about 120 or 125, you're going to take it off the indirect side, move it right over that scorching hot infrared side, and you're going to lift the lid, and you're going to pound one side of that steak with infrared energy. And you're going to start building that Maillard crust. And then, after only a minute or two, you're going to flip. And when you flip, the energy that is built up in that top half, which it faced the coals a minute ago, now it's facing up. It's like a capacitor or a battery. It'll hold that energy. That energy now bleeds off into the atmosphere, and it doesn't go deep into the meat. So it's not going to overcook the center of the meat. And then you flip again. Energy comes off into the atmosphere, not into the center of the meat. After a few flips, the temperature has risen in the inside from 125 to 130 or so, but it's not giving you that rainbow effect. You're building a beautiful crust all over brown, not just cross hatches, and you've got the perfect steak. And that's called reverse sear. And it's called reverse sear because most cookbooks tell you to sear first. And, you know, if you read, you sear the steak in a cast iron pan and then you throw it in the oven. You'll get the rainbow that way because the steak builds up energy in the surface.
Right. So you're a proponent definitely of, you know, not being afraid of flipping the steak multiple times. But let me go back.
I'm not only not afraid, I want you to.
Yeah. No, let me go back to the chicken. Because you said, you know, let's start the chicken, you know, on our cool side where there are no coals. So about how far should we be taking the chicken before we move it to the other side? Like around what temperature?
About 150. Usually, you know, usually your target is 10 degrees or so below your final target. So if your target is 160, somewhere around 150, you move it over to the hot side, lift the lid, put that skin side down. It gets golden and as crunchy as a potato chip. Flip it over, brown the backside. Piece of cake. It's safe, it's healthy, and nobody is going to get sick.
Right. Okay. Now, I do have this question. I know that this viewer is watching us from Dubai. So she's asking, well, she's saying that basically where she lives, grilling is a challenge after a long 8 to 5 job, 120 kilometer commute. I'm too tired to cook much. Any quick indoor friendly meals that will give that barbecue style satisfaction?
Oh dear. Well, just about any of the recipes in both my books can be cooked indoors. I mean, we just talked about a steak, for example. If you've got a steak that's only 1 inch thick, you just throw it in a hot pan, a cast iron pan with a little bit of oil, and flip, 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 and it's done. If you've got a thick steak, then you want to start it in the oven where it's going to cook with convection airflow. And then you're going to move it up on top and put it on a hot burner and sear the outside by flip, 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 flip. So it's just a matter of adapting. You know, a grill is just an oven. It's just an outdoor oven with a lousy thermostat. I mean, your indoor oven has a thermostat. So there's just about anything. For example, I have a really good eggplant Parmesan recipe that doesn't need frying. You just, I grill the tomatoes. Well, you don't have to grill them. You just put them on a sheet pan and bake them or broil them until the skin starts to crackle and blacken. You peel the skin off, throw it in a jar, and keep it in the fridge. And now you got fire roasted tomatoes. Take some out, smash them up in a blender or in a bowl, throw in some Italian spices, some oregano, some basil, some thyme, mix it up, and now you got a really good fire roasted tomato sauce. Throw it back in the fridge. Keep it there for a week until you need it. Then you got some eggplant. Well, most eggplant Parmesan, you make it by putting in a pan with about a ½ inch of oil, ½ inch, and you fry the eggplant. You don't have to fry the eggplant. You can grill the eggplant or put it in the oven. The broiler on your oven is an open flame. It's very much like the infrared zone on a grill, open flame. So you can put your eggplant in the oven turn on the broiler, and it will cook that eggplant without all that oil. Now you've got the eggplant roasted. You got your tomato sauce fire roasted. Throw a slab of your favorite melting cheese. Mozzarella is standard. Stick the whole thing under the broiler so the cheese melts a bit. And you've got a killer eggplant Parmesan, which with hardly any fat. So, I mean, the recipes can easily be adapted for indoors. If you're struggling to find recipes, I would recommend that, well, the reason you're struggling is because you don't know enough about cooking. And I don't mean to insult you. It's just that you wouldn't be struggling if you understood how cooking works, these three kinds of energy. And, you know, here's a really good example. Fire up your indoor oven to about 200 degrees. When it gets to 200 degrees, open the door and stick your hand in there. You can do this. It's not going to hurt. It's 200 degrees of convection airflow. After a while, you'll get pretty warm and you won't want to stay there, but you can put it in there. It's not going to singe the hair on your arm or anything. Now, reach over and touch the side of that oven. It's 200 degrees also, but that's hot metal. That's conduction energy versus convection energy. They're both 200 degrees, but if you touch the side of that oven, when you get back from the hospital, you will understand that just 200 degrees is not everything you need to know about heat. That there are different kinds of energy and different kinds of heat.
Right.
And these are the concepts. Once you get these concepts, and I teach them in my books. Both my books explain a lot of this, and they'll get you pretty far along. They are aimed at outdoor cooking, so you're going to have to do a little thinking on your feet and say, well, he's doing ribs in a smoker at 225. I'll do it in the oven at 225, not the broiler, but the oven. And I'll use the warm air in the oven to get there, and so on. And it's tricky. You got to learn to cook. I mean, it's like anything else. It's like learning how to do automobile repair. You gotta learn. And
Now
maybe
you've given
there's
us. I'm
maybe
sorry.
there's
Yeah.
a cooking school nearby. Here in the States, a lot of the kitchen supply stores teach cooking classes.
Right.
So
Now you've given us some sage advice, things to do different with regard to our steaks, chicken. Now how about brisket? I know I've got a couple of guys who are watching who still haven't done, their first brisket. They haven't taken that leap yet.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what's
Well,
your
I can understand.
favorite way to prepare a brisket?
Well, brisket is the Mount Everest. It is
Yes.
probably the toughest challenge, and there's a good reason for it. It is a really tough piece of meat, and the reason it's tough is it's the pectoralis muscles, the pectoral muscles, the chest muscles. It's where steers don't have a collarbone. So these muscles on the chest bear the weight of the head, the neck, the shoulders, the front legs, and part of the torso.
So
All
that's really tough.
borne by these two muscles. They work hard. And because they work hard, they have a lot of tough connective tissue. And if you cook them to 130, 135, which is what you want to cook a steak to, they're going to be unchewable. They're going to be too tough. The weird thing about brisket is you end up cooking it way beyond well done, which is 155. You're going to take it up to a minimum of 190, and I like 203 in that general range. Now, when you get up there, a lot of that connective tissue melts. It turns to gelatin. The fat renders. The muscle fibers relax. Right now, the top competition cooks are doing something that I've been doing for years. There's two muscles in the brisket. There's the flat and the point. And they lay on top, one lays on top of the other. The point lays on top of the flat. And in between, there's a very thick vein of fat. Take them apart, separate them. If you leave them together, you have a pear-shaped piece of meat. It is thick on one side and thin on the other. The thing that determines how long an object cooks is its thickness, not its weight. Its thickness. A 6-inch thick brisket that weighs 18 pounds and a 6-inch thick brisket that weighs 14 pounds will cook at the same rate. You have a roast, a Christmas prime rib. You go out and you buy a full 7-bone prime rib. So it weighs 12, 14 pounds, something like that. And then you go out and buy another one that's only 3 bones wide. But they're both 4 inches thick. They will both cook at the same rate, at the same time. That's because it takes time for energy to enter the meat and reach the center. And how thick it is determines how long it takes for that to go. So when you see a recipe for a roast or something that says 10 minutes per pound, run. It's wrong. It's how much. And the way to tell when your meat is ready is with a digital thermometer. This is the year 2025. And I keep running into knuckle draggers who say, I don't need no thermometer.
No.
You know?
Yeah, no excuse.
That's for thermometers are for sissies. A medium rare steak is 130, 135. If you use a digital thermometer, you'll never go wrong, and you'll never have to apologize to your table, where you might have the boss over for dinner. That it kind of got away from me. I'm sorry. You'll never have to say that again. And
no need for
chicken,
guessing.
which often has pathogens, you'll never have to take Granny to the hospital on the 4th of July. So you must have digital thermometers. We'll come back to the brisket question in a little more, but I'm rambling now. This is my favorite digital thermometer. Hard to see whether you can see it.
Fireboard
It has
Spark.
a probe, and this is the Fireboard Spark. And it is incredible. It is really accurate, like within a degree or two in less than 5 seconds. It has a port on one end where you can attach a probe on a cable, and it sells for about $150. This guy is a ThermoPro. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, we see it.
And it's got a nice long probe, and it is really accurate and really fast, and it's $15.
Right.
$150 versus $15. So you don't have to spend $150. The $150 one has all kinds of bells and whistles and capabilities, but this guy gets the job done just fine for $15. It's on Amazon.
That's right.
So back to the brisket. If you separate the two muscles, the flat muscle is just as its name applies. It's flat. And if you cut slices out of it, they're almost all uniform. They're gorgeous. They make beautiful sandwiches, just like corned beef sandwiches. And they're that's part of the display of a competition brisket, is those nice, gorgeous, even slices. The point is a little less uniform. It's kind of rough and tumble in some spots, but it's more marbled. It has more fat. It has more flavor. And the fat is the marbling. This is a really important point. Remember, surface fat cannot penetrate the meat. Meat is 75% water. Fat is 100% oil. Oil and water do not mix. So if you're working on a brisket, you'll notice that one side is pretty much bare meat, but the other side has got a thick layer of fat. Get rid of it. It does you no good. It cannot any place on this earth, it cannot penetrate the meat.
Yeah,
the meat is.
Let me just ask you real quick, because I saw this on Facebook today, and I had never heard this concept, but apparently there are a lot of people out there who believe that they don't need to trim the brisket at all. They're just buying the brisket and putting it on the smoker with all that fat. And I'm kind of thinking that doesn't make
Looney Tunes.
sense. Yeah.
That's Looney Tunes. Okay, let's take a look at all that fat. First of all, I want you to separate the muscles, but let's take a look at that fat.
Right.
That can be 3/4 of an inch thick or more. You're going to put your spices, your rub on top of it. When you roast this thing in the smoker, that fat layer, 3/4 of an inch, may shrink down to a 1/2 inch. And don't forget, your spice rubs are on top. When you cut your slices and you hand them to people, and they're seeing on their plate a gorgeous slab of protein with a 1/2 inch layer of fat on top, they are not going to eat that 1/2 inch layer of fat.
Right.
It's disgusting. Nobody eats fat pure like that. They'll cut it off. And when they cut it off, what happened to your spices? There they go.
Yeah.
In the trash. Remember that fat cannot penetrate the meat at any. Honestly, this a fact. Meat is 75% water, more or less a few points, depending on where you get it. But it's 75% water. The oil in the fat cannot get in. The marbling inside, and the point has plenty of marbling, and and that fat melts and mixes with the muscle fibers, and it's marvelous. But it's within the muscle fibers. It's not on top. So you're going to get as much of that fat off. I take it down to about 1/4 inch.
1/4 of an inch. Mm-hmm.
And then it melts down to about 1/8 of an inch during cooking and drips off. That 1/8 of an inch of thin layer of fat, your guests will eat that. They'll cut the meat and they'll eat the fat. But the other option is to get it all off and get your rub on top of the meat.
Right.
Flavor the meat with your rub. And that's a much better solution. So whomever you listen to on Facebook is dead wrong, and you can tell them I said so. And but they'll argue with it.
Yeah, no,
I went through this.
Yeah.
I mean, barbecue cooking, arguments often end in gunplay.
Right. Right.
I've run into this. I at every turn. At every turn, I run into the old timers who tell me I'm nuts.
Right.
But for every one of those, there's 100 who say, "Oh my God, you've improved my cooking immensely."
Right. Now, fat side up or fat side down, does it matter, or does it depend on what you're cooking on?
It depends on your device. If you're doing a Weber Smoky Mountain, the fire is down below. So you put the fat side down, and it'll absorb some of the energy and melt some of the fat. But if you leave it fat side up, then some of that fat will roll around on top of the meat. It's irrelevant. It doesn't make much of a difference. On an offset smoker, fat side up. Remember, I'm taking the fat off, so it doesn't matter.
Right. Now, another thing I've learned from you years ago, and I don't know if you still do it, but as a binder, I remember you advocating for using mayonnaise. Fat equals flavor. I remember that. I don't know, is that what you still do? Because I know most people tend to like mustard.
It wasn't as a binder.
Not as a binder?
No. In fact, for a binder, I just put my hands under the sink, get them wet, and I pat the meat and the spices stay on. You can use mustard.
Just water.
You can use mustard, but it's not going to increase. Mustard from a jar is very weak flavor. If you want mustard flavor, go get your powdered Coleman's mustard in a jar. That's got tons of flavor. The mustard in the jar, you won't taste it. You don't taste it. If you use it as a binder, it melts and it has no effect on the final flavor. So I just use water. But where mayo comes in is it is a great way to help keeping fish from sticking to the grill. All proteins want to stick to metal. If you put a steak down on a grill grate, it will eventually let go, and it's not a problem. You can flip it. But fish, by God, if you put it down on the grill and it sticks, it is not letting go. You better have a really sharp spatula. And I do this, by the way. I get my spatula. I got a grinder in the basement, and I go down there and I sharpen the tip of that spatula as sharp as I can get it, like a knife blade, to help me get under things like fish. Mayonnaise actually works better than oil. I don't know for sure why, but mayonnaise is a mixture of oil and egg and a little bit of vinegar or lemon juice and a sprinkle of salt, and that's it. So there's something about the oil and the egg that I think helps keep fish from sticking. But a better solution is there's a gadget out there. It looks like two tennis rackets. It's hinged at the top, and you put the fish on the webbing portion. It's metal, not catgut. And now you turn the tennis rackets. So it's not going to stick to the grates. Right. It will stick to the tennis rackets a little bit. But if you use mayo, it will let go. And you don't taste the mayo. That's the weird thing. I know there's a lot of people who hate mayo. It disgusts them. I don't know why. It's a psychological thing. But you won't taste the mayo. It works. Yeah.
Now for spritzing, I usually just spritz with water. I don't know if you think that there's anything in particular that does any better. And then how important is spritzing during your cook?
That's the core question. All right, think about it. You're going to take water or apple juice or Jack Daniels, whatever. You're going to spritz your meat. Say you've got a brisket. And brisket's taking a long time to cook, right? If you spritz it, now you're cooling the surface.
Right.
Now that could be good. That you may want to slow down the cook. but you're cooling the surface. So you're slowing down the cook and you're adding time to how long it takes to cook. Now, are you adding moisture? Not much. Remember, meat is 75% water or so. It's pretty saturated. But as it cooks, the surface dries out. So spritzing will reconstitute the surface. But your bark is dried meat. So if you spritz it and you reconstitute it, you're going to have less bark. It's not going to be as crunchy. Now, if you use apple juice, it has no effect on the flavor. Same thing as with mustard. The flavor compounds in mustard and apple juice are so few and far between, they don't add flavor. If you want to add flavor, go to your spice rack. That's concentrated flavor. Apple juice will not do a thing for it. You go to your Weber Smoky Mountain and you fill that water bowl with apple juice, you're wasting your money. There's no amount of molecules of flavor going to hit your meat and add flavor. It's a waste of money. Don't bother. So, I didn't quite fully explain why I want you to separate the two muscles on the brisket.
Okay, let's go back to that.
Partially because you have this pear shape, and one side is fatter than the other. But if you separate it, it's almost exactly the same thickness throughout. So it cooks evenly. Because thickness is a very important thing to consider. The other reason is that you'll get, especially if you scrape off all the fat from the two layers, you'll get a smoke ring on all sides, which looks cool. Doesn't have any flavor. Smoke ring does not add any flavor to the meat.
Right. It's just kind of a...
Then you take your point that you take off, and a lot of people make burn ends out of the point.
Right.
It used to be the burn ends just came from the edges of the brisket that got burnt, but that doesn't happen much. If you got the point off, you cook it right alongside the flat. And then when it's at the right kind of, we call it wubba wubba, when it wiggles and wiggles, wubba wubba wubba. You can cut it in cubes, throw it in an aluminum pan, throw in some barbecue sauce, whatever you want, and just kind of braise it in the barbecue sauce. And it gets really concentrated. And then you can pull them out and roll them around on a grill to get them crispy or crunchy. And they're fantastic. Those are burnt ends. You make a banh mi sandwich out of those. It's straight to heaven.
Right.
And that's what a lot of cooks do in competition.
So, that's a great point. I love that you're emphasizing, the separation of the point, from the flat, because I do feel like, especially when you're watching on YouTube, all these guys are showing us how to do brisket, but they always keep them connected. It's almost like another one of those pride points.
It's the old-fashioned way. It's the way it's been done for centuries in Texas. This idea of you can cook a whole chicken, but the legs are actually best around 170, the breast around 160, and if you cook it whole, you're not going to get any brown on the interior cavity. Far better is to cut the chicken into separate pieces, 6 to 8 pieces. Now, each piece to its optimum temperature, and you can get both sides brown, which is the Maillard reaction.
Right.
And, of course, that addresses the other great myth. And all of you out there now who are about to disagree with me and want to hang up, I'm sorry, but this is the truth. Beer can chicken doesn't work the way you think it does. First of all, I know you think your beer can chicken is fantastic, and you're right, it is. Because it's roast chicken, and roast chicken is always fantastic no matter how you do it. But the beer can has nothing to do with it. If you take a chicken out of the fridge at 38 Fahrenheit and stick it around a beer can, you have just made a chicken koozie. It is a 38-degree piece of meat insulating that beer can. So you've made a thermal mass. And during the cooking process, they reach the same temperature, the beer and the chicken. And the chicken is done at 160 to 170. What temperature does the beer boil at? 212 degrees. It's 90% water or so. So there's no boiling of the beer. It's not going to boil. And it's not going to, and it's up the cavity. So it prevents hot air from browning the interior of the cavity. Even if it could boil, it would only reach the interior of the shoulders. It can't travel to the breast and down to the legs. There's no superhighways inside a chicken. And for crying out loud, do you really want your chicken to taste like beer? Exactly. I'll drink the beer alongside my chicken. I don't want my chicken to taste like beer. Have you ever seen a Michelin star restaurant serve beer can chicken?
No, absolutely
no.
not.
They don't. The beer can has nothing to do with it. It just looks cool. That little Buddha sitting there, and it's marvelous because it's roast chicken. But you can do better.
Right.
And that's, you cut it up into pieces, cook them individually, get each piece to perfect temperature. It'll cook faster. You'll have less moisture loss. And the same thing with turkey. I know that your Thanksgiving turkey has to look like a Norman Rockwell painting, but if you are willing to at least spatchcock it, which is to open it up and butterfly it, now you can brown the inside. It'll cook faster and less moisture loss. Cooking whole animals or multiple muscles at one time is hazardous. Think of cooking a whole hog.
Yes.
You're going to cook a whole hog. What is your target temperature? Well, you're going to cook it up into around the 190, 200 range in order to properly cook the shoulders and the hams. Well, if you're going to do that, you're going to absolutely destroy the tenderloin, which is best at 140, or the loin, which is best at around 140. Those are tender, low-fat pieces. You cook them up to the temperature of the shoulders, you've ruined them. Far better to break your pork down into individual pieces and cook them separately.
All right, guys, now we're being joined by Barbecue Hall of Famer, one of only 40 living Hall of Famers, Meathead. He has a new book out, The Meathead Method. So in that book, you're going to get sage advice as well as, recommendations that aren't just being pulled out of the sky, but he's giving you the science behind it, which is what I love. And you've touched on a number of things that, kind of sparked these different questions in my head. But I know another thing that you are a big proponent of is the importance of safety and cleanliness. Can you touch on that as well?
Yeah, I had the good fortune to marry a PhD microbiologist. And so she has imparted me with a respect for microbes, bacteria, safety. And so there's a good section in this book that discusses some safety techniques and tricks. It's all about methodology. I've always maintained that it's not good business practice to kill your customers. I want you to... Right. Now, with that, let me tell you, you won't find anything about health in these books. I do not write about health. I don't know what the dietitians, the doctors, the health people, there is an article on AmazingRibs.com in which I discuss my concerns about dietary science and my disdain for what a lot of us see. I spend some time on X, Twitter. It just makes me sick how much health advice is there. Eat nothing but meat. Don't eat meat. Eat fat. Don't eat fat. And it's all anecdotal. There's little factuality or science behind it. And even the official stuff from the top scientists, it's always questionable because the methods they use, I can, for example, I work with a scientist, both my wife and I work with Professor Greg Blonder of Boston University. And years ago, I asked him, I said, how do we determine what causes the stall? Now, the stall is when you're cooking a brisket or a pork butt, and it goes up to 150, 160, and then it stops. And nobody knew why. And how do we determine this? So he designed an experiment. And it was a very clever and a simple experiment. He took a pork butt, he took a softball-sized hunk of fat, he took a big sponge and filled it with water and put them all in the smoker and measured the temperature on them. And at that time, everybody thought it was collagen melting or fat rendering and stuff. And we determined the sponge followed exactly the temperature of the pork butt. Why? Because the pork butt's 70% water. But what happens is it rises in temperature in the center, which is where your thermometer is, up to about 150, and then it stops. And the reason it stops is because the surface is evaporating water. It's just like when you go out and cut the lawn. You start sweating and it cools you. That evaporation cools the meat and it reaches a stasis. It reaches a point where the hot air warms it at the same rate that the evaporation cools it. So it doesn't go up in temperature until the surface dries out. And when that happens, there's your bark. It's like jerky. Your bark is like jerky. It's the same process. Once the surface dries out, then the temperature can go back up. And we wrote this up, and I went to several of the message boards that were popular and shared this information and got nothing but invective and anger and idiocy. And, we had a solid experiment. We could demonstrate, we could show for a fact what happened. Now everybody agrees. It's evaporative cooling. Everybody knows this. It's common knowledge. They don't give me credit, but we discovered it. That's gold standard science. That's a science experiment that gives you data that proves a point. The problem with dietary science is most of the information is based on a diary that people keep. Here's what I ate for breakfast. Here's what I ate for lunch. Here's what I ate for dinner. And they do this for years. And then they count morbidity. They want to see, okay, who died? The vegetarians, the vegans, the carnivores. And they try to correlate the diet with mortality. And correlation doesn't equal causation. It's very iffy. And people who are writing in a diary, they don't write down the cheesecake they had for dessert because they're embarrassed.
Right.
Or they forget what they had for breakfast and they don't put it in there. So it's a very iffy way of gathering data. There is some useful information that they gather from this, but I am skeptical of much of it, so I don't write about health. You won't find me, and I know a lot about food. You won't find me saying, here's a healthy recipe, because I don't know for sure it's healthy. My eggplant parmesan on the grill has much less oil than eggplant parmesan in the kitchen where it's fried.
Yeah.
But I'm not telling you that it's healthy. So it's much less oil in the final result. So there is a lot of safety stuff, but not health stuff.
Okay. And I totally respect that. As you so eloquently described. Now, you've already busted some barbecue myths for us. Is there another one that maybe you can tell us about that surprised people the most?
Well, let's see if I can show you my bookshelf. I don't know if you can see over there. Yeah, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
There's two bookshelves. They're a little hidden behind my monitor here. Two big bookshelves from IKEA. Probably 200 books. They're all barbecue books. There are that many out there. And they all tell you, soak your wood.
Hmm.
Now, we haven't talked about this yet, have we?
Yeah, no, we haven't.
Yeah, forgive me. I've talked to a lot of people. I forget who I talked to about what.
I know people believe that you should soak your wood chips.
Everyone says soak your wood chips. All right, let's think about this for a minute. You know why they build boats out of wood? Because wood doesn't absorb water. Now, I've done this. You go and get a bunch of wood chunks, wood chips, soak them, not just for an hour or two like a lot of the books say, overnight, 24 hours. Take them out, pat the surface dry, because there's a lot of surface water on there, and the weight gain is about 2 or 3%. And most of that is just because water sticks to the rough edges on the surface. Cut the chunk of wood open, bone dry in there. The water doesn't get in. Now, take wet wood, throw it on a charcoal fire. What's it going to do? It's going to knock the temperature down. You worked hard to get it up to 225, and now you've knocked it down to 200. You got to get it back up. But there's all this beautiful white puffy stuff coming out. So you think you got a lot of smoke. It's not. It's steam. Hold a mirror in it. It's steam. And the reason it's steam is because water boils at 212. Wood smokes at 500. So you throw that wet wood on top of a fire, and it takes a few minutes, and it produces a lot of white puffy steam. And it can't go beyond, the wood cannot go beyond 212 until the water evaporates. Then it finally goes up to 500, and now you got smoke. And by the way, you don't want the smoke to smolder. Smoldering wood is because it's starved for oxygen. And it doesn't taste as good as wood that has burned with a yellow flame. That yellow flame is consuming impurities coming from the wood. You want to give it all the oxygen it can take. You'll see a lot of the big pitmasters with big horizontal, they open the door. They let the air flow. You want yellow flame. You'll use more wood. People complain, I use a lot more wood when it catches on fire. That's okay. The smoke is better. It tastes better.
And then in terms of the smoke, you know, we hear a lot about the blue smoke, the thin blue smoke, or the almost invisible smoke. Is that what we really should be looking for? Is that important?
Yep.
Yeah.
When you have burning wood with a yellow flame, it produces very little particles. If the wood burns really dirty, we call it, you'll get black smoke or brown smoke or yellow smoke. White smoke is, you can see the white smoke because the particles refract light. Blue smoke is smoke that is barely visible.
Right.
Smoke is complicated. It has particles in it, but it's also got a lot of gases. It's got a lot of water. It's got a lot of other stuff in there. So blue smoke, made by burning wood with a yellow flame, we call it blue smoke because the particles are so tiny, it's a little bluish in color, and sometimes it's hardly visible at all. But it's there.
And then, should we even be dealing with the wood chips? You know, is it best to deal with like wood chunks? You know, and then obviously if you're cooking on an offset, you're going to use the splits. But where do chips really have a place in all of this, or is that just a waste of time?
I mean, especially for something that you're going to cook fast, like fish fillet, wood chips, sawdust, smokes fast, flavors the meat quickly, because fillet, you're going to have, or have it off the flame, off the heat at 125. It's cooked in 20 minutes, so you want to give it smoke and you want to give it in a hurry. You can use, every now and then I go to my spice rack and I see, oregano that's been there for 6 months or so. I'll throw that on the fire. This new book has Chinese tea smoking in it. It's all about methods. Chinese tea smoked duck is a world classic, and I explain how to do tea smoking. There's just a lot of it's technique, it's methods, it's tricks. There's a recipe for smoked fettuccine. You get a 9x13 pan, you get a bunch of ice cubes, fill it up, stick it in your smoker. Cold surfaces attract smoke better than warm surfaces. It's called thermophoresis. That's why your mirror fogs up. It attracts small particles, steam. You throw the ice cubes in the smoker. It attracts the small particles from the smoke. And the water tints a little bit, gets a little amber in color. Then you take that, you pour it in a pot and boil your fettuccine in there. And you got a smoke-flavored fettuccine. It's a clever technique. All kinds of fun stuff in this book. It's designed to take your audience, guys like who follow you. They've been cooking ribs and brisket, and they may not be getting it exactly the way they want it. It may not be perfect. This will help them get closer, but it will also give them a chance to get outside of the box, right, and do new stuff. The first book had great recipes for brisket and chicken and pulled pork and ribs for a backyard cook. Well, I couldn't put a new book to bed without ribs and brisket, so what I did was I went to the competition cooks and I got their recipes. So if you're thinking about entering a competition or you want to try what the competition cooks do, it's in the new book.
Absolutely. Great. I really appreciate it. Well, I'm not going to hold you much longer. I only have one more question that I wanted to ask.
Good, because I got to pee.
Okay. All right. I respect that too. The science is calling, the biological science. Pellet grills, where do they fit in? Like, we've talked about gas
I think
and charcoal.
They're the coolest thing.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, they have a thermostat on them.
Right.
My indoor oven has a thermostat on it. I mean, that's, women who've learned to cook with a thermostat. It's one of the reasons they don't grill, because there's no thermostat. It's a foreign environment. But these pellet smokers have a thermostat. Now, if you've never seen them and you don't know much about them, basically they burn these little pellets. They look like rabbit pellets, but they're pure wood. There's no glue, no binder, no nothing. They're just compressed into these. It's like you took a pencil and snapped it into 10 pieces. And that's pure wood. Right. It burns with a very mild smoke because the combustion is very efficient. And it's almost a blue smoke. You don't see a lot of smoke out of it. And it's a mild smoke. Texans don't like them because they want that big, robust mesquite flavor. But you can get mesquite pellets, but it's just not as strong as when you burn logs. But it's a very elegant flavor. I think it's, instead of a brass band, it's more like a string quartet. And it's a nice flavor. And you can regulate how much smoke with some of them. The lower the temperature, the more smoke. The higher the temperature, the less smoke. But the beauty is now the modern ones talk to your phone. So you can get a brisket, which is going to be a 10, 12-hour cook. Get up in the morning, and before you shower and shave, You throw the brisket on there and set it for your temperature. And then you go to work downtown and you keep an eye on the meat with your phone, and you know you're going to be home at 5 o'clock, and it's lagging behind, so you dial up the temperature a few notches. I mean, how cool is that?
Right.
Hell, you can do this on an airplane, and the flavor is good. And you know, some of the new ones, I have one of the modern Traegers now. It's got an induction cooker on the side. So I mean, I do deep frying on it. I do the veggies, the sauce and stuff. Yeah, they're great. I love them. The technology is moving ahead and the prices are moving down.
Right.
So if you're looking for a nice smoker that doesn't require a lot of nurturing, I mean, when I came up, when I was learning to smoke, and I learned from those guys in the back behind YT Parker's barbecue in Gainesville, Florida, I mean, you had to sit by the pit.
Right.
And you had to watch it, and you didn't have thermometers. You had to know what temperature, and you had to throw a log in every now and then. It was, more art than it was science. Now it's more science than it is art.
Well, Meathead, thank you again. I really do appreciate you coming on. Like I mentioned to you before, it's been a kind of a wild day here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if your audience knows, you lost power today. I didn't think we were going to make it.
Well,
I didn't think we were going to make it.
Had an earthquake this morning, not a big one. Yeah, it was like a 3.3, but it wasn't based not too far from where I live. I live in a town called Clayton, California, which is next door to Concord, near Walnut Creek. So I'm in the Bay Area.
Okay. I know where Walnut Creek is.
Yeah, I'm a little bit east of Walnut Creek. So we had a little bit of an earthquake, had our first 90 plus degree day. I think it was 97 or something. And, you know, we just can't handle it. And, my power went out about an hour and a half before we were going to go live. So got totally thrown off, all discombobulated. But, you know, Meathead hung with me, and, you know, I gave him word that I got my power back 10 minutes before we were supposed to go live, and he said, yeah, let's go. You know, it got right on, so I really do appreciate it. One more thing, for the folks who are still watching, I forgot to do this. I talked to your publicist. She agreed that I could give away a copy of your new book, which is the Meathead Method. So I'm going to make this simple. If you guys were paying attention, I'm going to give it to the first person who puts in the comment the name of Meathead's previous book. It's a bestseller. It's it's been named one of the 100 best cookbooks of all time. So if you're the first person to put it in the comments, we'll connect, and then I will make sure to get that book to you. So again, much appreciation to Meathead. Again, go out there. This is a great time for barbecue.
It's great to meet you, Kenyatta. This was fun.
Absolutely.
Good questions.
Yes,
I enjoyed myself.
And I'll make sure to post this in Amazing Ribs as well.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to let you go. Thank you, Meathead. Again, I really appreciate you.
And thanks for the good questions, listeners.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm going to get ready to log off. But like I said, I'm going to hang in there a little bit and see who's going to be the first person to claim the book. And again,
I'm going to log off because I got to go down the hall.
I know. You got to do what you got to do.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks again. All right. So that was Meathead, one of the 40 living barbecue Hall of Famers. So gracious with his time. I really do appreciate it. So, you know, this whole experience for me has been really humbling. This is, like I mentioned, this is the 75th podcast. And we do have a winner. So actually, let me get that up here. We have a winner, KB Barbecue, the Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling. That is the name of the best-selling book that I was looking for. So KB Barbecue, do me a favor. Um, let's see. Many ways that you can. I just need to get your mailing information. So do this. Send an email to me, and I'll put it in the chat. You can send it to Kenyatta at Backyard SmokeMaster.com. So let me get that up here. So email me at that address, and I'll make sure to get, your mailing information over to Meathead's people, and we will send out a copy of his new book, Meathead, the Meathead Method. So as I was gonna say though, I think this is an incredible time, in barbecue. And as he eloquently, put it, back in the day, um, we were more kind of, just kind of doing kind of hand-me-down, traditions, one generation to the next. And like you said, it was more of an art. But now with the marriage of barbecue with technology, we've got all these different accessories. We've got these digital thermometers that let us know the temperature, inside of our meat instantaneously. We've got things that help us measure the temperature inside of our cooking chamber more accurately than the built-in thermometer that came with the grill. Like I said, a ton of different accessories. We've got these pellet smokers with these electronics that will moderate the temperature for you. That'll talk to our phones, so you can, monitor what's happening, inside of your smoker, with your phone and everything. So, it's just a really a great time to be involved in barbecue. So take advantage, and I think a book like Meathead's, the Meathead Method, will definitely help you level up, your barbecue experience, because again, he's bringing, scientific knowledge, and as he talked, and I think about some of the things that I have shared with my audience. I think a lot of it, probably more than anyone else, I probably have gotten from following Meathead over the years. And there's something about when someone is able to give you kind of the science behind it, some logical explanations and reasons to do X, Y, or Z. There's something about that speaks to me, and I like to share that on to you. All right, so I do appreciate it. Thanks, guys. I'm, kind of trying out some new stuff here. Got some swag. So definitely good to hear that you guys, like the gear that I've got on. It's definitely a process. So I do appreciate that, and maybe I will try and make that available if you guys are interested. I do appreciate you guys for tuning in and hanging in there with your questions and your comments and everything. So just truly humbled. Like I said, this is my 75th podcast. Never thought that it would be something that I would be doing this consistently for this long. So truly humbled, and the stars kind of aligned, where Meathead came on today's episode. So when I say that this is the best hour of the week, I really mean it. I love talking barbecue with folks who are, as passionate and who love it as much as I do. And then also the folks who are trying to learn to get better about barbecue. So I really am happy that I'm able to reach those folks as well. All right, guys, so we're going to get out of